Myra, what's your definition of social listening?
Well, first of all, I understand why social listening and social monitoring get confused or kind of used interchangeably because they both are strategies related to listening and related to watching for and collecting information, brand mentions, and key terms. So, because they're related to that type of action, it does seem like, they're interchangeable, but social monitoring is more real time. It's more so for listening or watching for those mentions at the moment and being able to respond to it. Whereas social listening is a bit more complex. It's more research related. So it's a bit more of a long-term type of an approach where you collect information over a period of time. And you do that first by monitoring, you collect that data. And over a long period of time, you listen and use that data, that insight to, maybe pivot some campaigns or create campaigns or change campaigns. Those are the key differences between the two.
So if I'm hearing this right, social media monitoring tells you what it is and why something is happening, but monitoring is more of the symptoms, more of like listening reveals the root cause of the issue, because then you can find out what people like, why they like it, and what's so interesting.
Yeah, one of the use cases I would use here in this case is, for an example, if a brand is using influencers. So they would have a person, a key member, monitoring those conversations of the influencers. And so they would actually interact with them, engage with them real time. And then after the campaign runs, then you'd have the individual or your team member do a listening campaign where they would listen from the beginning of that campaign to the end. And you're really looking for information of like, okay, who responded to the influencers? Like, how well did the consumers or the fans respond to the influencers? How many of the influencers comments actually mentioned the brand or one of the key products that the brand was trying to promote. So that long-term listening strategy right there will give the brand information on maybe they should use that particular influencer again because they did so well. Okay. They had higher engagement versus another.
And Natalie, I'm not leaving you out because you have been instrumental in so many of the listening projects and monitoring projects that we have here at V3. I'd love to get your perspective on listening versus monitoring and kind of like what that means and what you've seen.
Yeah, so from my perspective, there's definitely a difference. Monitoring is definitely more of like the what, whereas the listening is more about the why. So shaping why we do the things we do, why we're suggesting content, why it could potentially resonate better with our audience. So for example, like really kind of leveraging listening as a tactical way to implement your strategies so that you actually get actionable results and you hit those goals that you set up initially based off of what you want to accomplish. And with that being said, there's so many things that can really benefit from this, including like learning more about who your audience is, or specifically learning more about how they differ from channel to channel, specifically on social media, and how that might be slightly different than your Google Analytics and what that means for your brand. Not only really learning about who they are, but also like listening and finding out how they feel about your brand or about your product or the service that you offer. But beyond that as well, so identifying like what topics do they care about that relate to your brand. How can you strengthen that relationship between that brand and that customer? And what content do they find interesting other than just straight up promotions? Because everyone also wants to know the behind the scenes things like content marketing. They do say content is king, and we've seen that time over time. I would also leverage it to identify topics and trends that your audience is incredibly passionate about, so that you have not only very interesting and entertaining content, but also something that genuinely interests your audience, because there's like thousands of ads and thousands of pieces of content on social media that it's so easy to just kind of quickly swipe up. So you need something that's going to captivate their attention, be relevant, but also something that's going to spark that genuine connection between you and your customer or your audience online. And the last piece of it would be really just truly identifying like what it is that your audience wants and how can you make them tick or take that desired action that you're looking for based off of whatever it is that your campaign objective is. Like, for example, if I want my audience to learn more about, say, an app that I'm launching, then what are the pieces of content that are going to make them tick, and what are some of the relevant topics that might not be a direct promotion but help influence their engagement to express that interest in my app, or to download my app, or to use my app.
I love that. I think in addition to that, also the competitive benchmarking aspect of it, which we didn't touch on, being able to spy on your clients, spy on your competitors, being able to understand what's working and what's not working with them, as well as intercepting consideration. Because a lot of times, in automotive, people say, I'm looking for a car. Well, it's a great opportunity for car brands to like jump into that conversation, talk about, their vehicles that might fall in love with this customer, and kind of like really use listening in a way that helps them to gain a new prospective customer. And I think lastly would also be around understanding social proof and direct testimonials. So small businesses definitely need that conversation, those testimonials that clients and customers are providing. They can use that to go out and get more business.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then also, like, you can really leverage it to identify problems that your customers are currently facing as well. Like, for example, there was one client account that we worked on that was in the entertainment industry, specifically around customer service, being able to identify how can we improve this beyond social media? How can we get our audience to climb back into favor with us? Maybe they might have had experienced some like lower customer service responses. So how can we really streamline that support while reducing costs? And a really good way to identify that was really seeing how many inbound communications were coming online, and that really enabled the client to further expand their services through their app as well, to streamline that during a time where everything is completely digital, while also being able to kind of maintain that budget and add that extra support.
No, I love that. And I think now to switch gears towards more monitoring, where a brand is actually looking at their own messages, their own channels, and kind of seeing how consumers, especially with like doing a campaign or something, so they can actually learn about how customers feel about a specific ad or feel about a specific product. For us, monitoring is like key for every brand, because it's the only way that you're going to know on a regular basis how consumers feel about anything that you do, whether it be your content, your advertising, your media buying. All of those conversations are collected on your channels and can be gleaned and put into informational reports that can be fed back to HR, to PR, to product planning. Like all of the different ways that we've been able to leverage that, even legal, and leverage that social media monitoring, the comments that are coming from the brand, and give that information back to the brand so that they can do something actionable with it.